Hello, and thank you for joining Generation Equipped Ministries. One of our missions here at this ministry is to equip young people, the next generation, to have a more confident faith and be able to speak with courage in the culture that they live in. And many times we do this by connecting with influencers, parents, pastors, grandparents, which is very important. But many times on this channel, I don't talk to the actual generation themselves. Well, today I'd like to do just that. I have a special guest today, and we're going to get to that right after this. So I'm really excited and privileged to have one of my daughters on the program today, and I'd like to get some of her thoughts and insights as she can speak to her culture. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Alyssa. Welcome to the program.
Hello.
So Alyssa, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll move forward with some questions.
So like you mentioned, my name is Alyssa, and I'm 18 years old. I graduated from high school last year, and I started working as a barista at a coffee shop. And I've been taking a gap year. It's almost coming to an end, and then I'm going to start working towards becoming a vet tech. And I've been a Christian for as long as I can remember, and I currently serve in children's ministry at my church.
So you are projected to be in one of the largest demographics in the world. And so here's some things that are attributed to your generation. Some of these things you may not think is positive. Some of them are positive. But let me just read some of these, and then we're going to get some of your thoughts. But some of the things attributed to your generation, your digital natives, I can speak from personal experience. You're very familiar. I go to you a lot of times with technical problems with my iPhone or my Mac, so I don't think you'll disagree with that. But you're digital natives. You're being raised and you've grown up in a post-truth culture. You're researchers. You have information at your fingertips. Some say that your generation is impatient. Gender is not defined by your sex at birth. Your generation has a different view of the family unit than when I grew up in the 70s and 80s. Many say that you're lonely. But here's some positives, I think, would be you're social justice oriented. Many in your generation are drawn to causes. You have an entrepreneurial spirit. But here's one thing that's alarming to me, and I know it is to you as well. Only 4% of Gen Zers adopt a biblical worldview. And now statistics, Alyssa, are saying about 60 to 80% of your generation that grew up in a Christian home like you did are walking away from the faith. That's an alarming rate. Why didn't you, or why haven't you walked away from the faith?
So, I would say the biggest part to me would be my upbringing. So, as you know, I was raised in a Christian home with a big family, and I was taught Christian principles from a very young age, and I always saw them as truth. They were truth to me, and they still are. But with a big family, there's a lot of accountability that goes on. You see how your older sisters just kind of walk through life in what they don't do that other people do, and it's just kind of sets the bar, sets the example for you. And then having friends that just are Christians as well, like if you're living that worldly life, they're going to notice, and it's going to change friendships because they're going to be checking on you. But I think a very big part was also I was shown the fun part of Christianity, which not everyone unfortunately is given that experience with Christianity. Whereas I was grown up in a home church, and then all the people that I grew up with, they became my family because I'd known them forever. And all the church events became a very big part of my life. And I just had such a positive view of it. And then everything positive in my life was connected with my faith that they kind of went hand in hand for me.
So I'm curious, when you, just from your perspective of being raised in our home, do you feel that you were sheltered from the outside world, or do you think you were exposed to things but in a healthy environment? I'm just curious your perspective, and if you felt that was a good thing or a bad thing.
So that's actually interesting, because that I think is super important and not talked about enough, is the sheltering versus protecting. It can be harmful or it could be helpful. A lot of Christians actually have different viewpoints on that. And I think it is very dangerous to over shelter your child, because we've seen so many examples of people who were raised so sheltered that it almost was a disservice to them, because they had no idea what the world offered, and then they saw what they offered and they just went the complete other way. I think for me, we had a good balance where we were raised knowing biblical truths, but then we knew the other part of the world. You always had mentioned to us, like, getting a shot. Like, that was your always example. Like, you have to get a little bit of it so your body can fight it. If you've never seen it before, it'll just throw you off completely.
When you say shot, you mean to the audience like an inoculation?
Yeah.
For some people that maybe don't know, we also have a business where we breed therapy golden dogs and service dogs, golden retrievers, and sorry to cut you off, but he just triggered him. One of the things that I mention often is you take this cute little golden retriever puppy that's 6 weeks old and you inject this little dose of poison in it, parvo, distemper, hepatitis. And I think what you're getting at, and what I've tried to do, not perfectly, is to inject some of the poison of the culture. How could there be a good God with evil and suffering? Or how can you believe the Bible? Hasn't it changed over the years? So those are those little doses that I knew you were going to get in the culture anyway. But if you can be exposed to it in a safe environment on a bedrock of truth, I feel, and you would be the one to speak more than I could now, being an adult yourself, has that benefited you in life to kind of learn some of what's happening in the culture, but also be equipped how to handle it?
Yeah, so I just don't want to pronounce that word wrong. That's why I said shot. But I think there was a good balance, and I don't think it hurt me. I think it was good knowing kind of what the world had to offer, and then known what they were going to throw at you. Because for a lot of people, they go into high school or mainly college, and the professors just attack them with all these things that they can't fight because they've never heard, and it throws them off. So not only do they have to defend it to themselves, they have to prove why their thing is correct to the professor. And it really throws a lot of people off, and then they're just swayed by it. So I think it is super important to have a good balance on letting the kids have like an honest upbringing, and not like kind of poisoning their brain early on with all these things. But then they do need to kind of see a little bit what the world has to offer, just so you can show them like the light versus the dark. And not everything the world has to offer is bad. So it is good to show them a little bit of the balance. You just need to have a balance. And I think we had that for sure. And I think that has helped, because then you grow up, and like especially now going into work environments, and then for some going into school environments, like you're not thrown off because you're like, I've heard that before and actually know the answer to it. So I'm not going to be thrown off, and I can actually help someone else.
So you have a unique position being a Gen Zer yourself. You heard some of the statistics, and some of those were negative. Maybe give a message of hope, or could you speak to your generation, give a word of encouragement, or maybe even to the parents or influencers or people that are affecting those. From your perspective, what do you think we can do better? And maybe, again, speak to your current generation with some words of encouragement.
Going back to my upbringing and just why I haven't walked away from my faith, I definitely have seen, or what I believe from, other Gen Zers, is they connect Jesus with hurt or bad feelings from the past, which I can understand where they're coming from. Where, like you mentioned, how could there be so evil with people that, like, how could people have such bad things happen to them if they're like a good person? Or like, how can God let this person die? Like, all of that kind of stuff. And then even, no one's perfect. Like, even the church, like, we're just human beings and we mess up all the time. So some people have hurt that happens in the church. And that's why it's so important to just be a good light and be such a testimony, because not only are you trying just to be a good person, you're representing Christ. So you are a small fraction of what Christ should be. So you need to be showing that, because if I've heard so many people mention like how they had a bad experience with a Christian, and now all of Christianity is just smeared to them. So I think it's so important. I think that has played a big effect, especially in Gen Z, because there's a lot of anger going on, and they connect Jesus with hurt that has happened with other people. And then with Christianity, it just trauma that may has happened and all that stuff. So I think as Christians, one way we can help is we need to be more aware of our effect. We're special people, and we need to take our responsibility serious, because God is holy, and we do need to portray that a little bit with us, because you can actually turn people off to Christianity, and that's super harmful.
So what I totally agree with what you're saying, and it resonates very well. And if I could maybe translate to my generation, or those that are in the church, or maybe leaders or pastors, or what Alyssa is saying, I think, is hypocrisy in the church, hurt in the church, as viewed by your young people. Sometimes that's like, I want nothing to do with Christianity, if that's what it is. And so I think that's a message that us adults, those that are older, can definitely pray about and ask God, again, not that we're perfect, but try to be genuine, try to be real. And again, when there's division and chaos in the church, it doesn't change who God is. He's not the author of confusion, but it does send a strong signal to your generation. It's like, if that's true Christianity, I want nothing to do with it. So that's a very valid point, and I think that's something the church needs to hear loud and clear.
One thing that I definitely would take the positives from our generation is we do stand up for ourselves, and I think that is important for people to stand up for themselves in a good way, in a responsible and respectful way. But the bad part that comes from that is that sometimes Christianity, they see it as, that's just a set of rules that I have to live by. I'm free. I'm not owned by anybody. I don't need to follow a set of rules, and see God is just telling you what I can and what I can't do. And they just want to live their lives. But for me, how I was raised, how I was told Christianity, and how I think people need to say it instead of, these are what you can't do, I simply view the Bible as like a cheat sheet to life. Like, he's not telling you you can't do this, you can't do that. He just shows you examples in the Bible where people did lust and people did sin and they did have their eyes wander, and then you see the consequences of what happens. He's telling you, yeah, you can't do that because it leads to hurt for you. So whereas we see it as, I don't want you telling me what to do, instead it's like, no, God's saving you from the hurt. And then for me, I like, one way that I try to reach out to people is do it through God's love. Whereas a lot of people kind of forget that. And it's not a bash on Christians. It's just recognizing not everyone has the correct approach. One example I would use is back at my work, there was a guy pacing out in the front of our store with a big sign that just was basically focusing on the negative, like you're going to hell, all this, and he had a megaphone and is screaming at people. But he's a Christian. And then one of my coworkers has to go outside and, be like, dude, you can't be out here.
Right.
Like, it's our property. And he comes in and is just really frustrated and just says to me, he's like, I just don't understand why they don't understand that. Not everyone's going to believe what you believe. And then on my side, I'm like, that guy is doing wrong, but he's being bold. And if he just translated it into a healthier way.
So his method was wrong. Maybe he was even speaking the truth, but sometimes our method gets in the way.
Yeah, he's focusing on the hurt and the harshness and the reality, but you can see if how for my coworker, negative response, not going to help anybody, and frustration, and now in his mind, a bit of Christianity is associated with what that guy was hurting people with.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to focus on God's love, because that draws people in. And be realistic. Do tell people the harsh truth, but you need to draw them in with a little bit of love first and build a relationship.
That's what I was going to mention. So that's the truth in Scripture. There's an actual verse that says to speak the truth in love. So again, another good point from a Gen Zer to us influencers is, don't be so focused on the truth, but speak the truth in love. Don't compromise, but we do need to connect with people. And that's a good transition, Alyssa, to this next question I have for you. And you've covered some, and some of this overlaps. But what are some things you believe that we can do? Those of us that are older, that have a heart for you, what can we do better to connect with your generation? Because a lot of times, we've got some more experience and maybe more wisdom, but sometimes I see a disconnect. So how can we connect more with your generation?
So I think one thing that is very well known, I think, and a little stereotyped, but definitely true, is that a decent amount of my generation deals with loneliness, abandonment, and depression and anxiety. Sometimes I do believe that parents will write that off as just being a teenager. It's the cliche line is, oh, you have teenagers? It's just like, oh, that's hard for you. Which obviously it is. It's hard to understand teenagers. And then especially now Gen Z, they're getting almost into their 20s probably now. So obviously it is hard having a kid who's a teenager, because sometimes you think they're just being over dramatic and you don't even know what they're talking about, or they're just being disrespectful. And while those things may be true, what they are saying to you, it is stemming from something. So I think the biggest message that I could give parents would be, hear your child. Because there can be times where you have no idea what they're talking about and you're just confused. And I don't understand why you feel that way. I don't understand why you're saying that. That doesn't make sense. But the difference is, no matter what they're saying, they do feel that way. And that is hard for them to feel that way. I know everyone at all ages does experience that, but teenage years is definitely a more hyper time where so many of those feelings are coming out and you don't even know why you're feeling depressed or lonely or super anxious. And I think it's super important for the parent to just, even if I don't understand, I hear you. How can I help you?
Or at least validate your feeling.
Yeah, validation is one of the biggest things, I would say, because in your brain you may think, I'm crazy. I don't even know why I feel this way. I don't even know how to explain it to anyone. So you just don't, because how would they get it? So I think the biggest thing is reaching out, because sometimes they won't tell you because they don't even know how to tell you. So I think it's big when parents, people older, mentors, just, how are you? What's going on? Are you okay? But not just like, oh yeah, I'm fine. No. Like, actually tell me what's going on. Mm-hmm. How was work? All those things, just really reaching out, because you can say you'll be there for them when they come to you, but sometimes they don't know how to come to you. They don't get it. So it really, really helps when you validate their feelings, even if they could be wrong. They could be, a lot of people, teenagers, especially girls, experience image problems and body dysmorphia, and so many of those problems that are just brain things that are so not true. Like, and instead of being like, why are you saying that? You're not fat, you're not too skinny, like, that's not gonna help. Just say, I validate that you feel that way, but this is how it can help you, and from my point of view, that's not true. And you're not lonely. I mean, you may be feeling lonely, and I'm sorry you feel that way, but you're not alone. Everyone's around you. We're here for you. So there's a good balance on validating them, but then also helping them realize that those feelings are just feelings. Even if they stem from things, you do have to validate, but then you can help. But you do have to do both.
Good. Some really good insight, I think, and hopefully parents and those that have a heart for young people are hearing what Alyssa's saying. It's good for me too, because I don't have this all figured out, but I know what she's saying is true. Having 5 daughters, I think it is so, and a wife, it's so important to listen, to understand. Sometimes from a guy's perspective, you might think this is irrational, this is silly, but what she's saying is take them seriously. They're going to talk to someone, so it might as well be you, and make them feel worthwhile and they're loved. And you don't always have to fix their problem. Guys, we love to fix problems, and I've made this mistake with my wife so many times, just telling her the truth when sometimes all she needs is a hug or your arm around her, and that makes things so much better. So excellent points, Alyssa. That was more, I think, to the generation that needs to do a better job connecting with you. Any other words for your generation? Maybe some words of hope or courage or comfort or anything?
One thing is, I don't like that we're stereotyped to this. We're depressed, we're lonely, we're anxious, we're disrespectful, we're the failed generation. Whereas that's not true at all. Every generation has had so many problems, and we kind of get hyper focused on what the now is, and we forget all the problems that have gone on with everyone else. But I think when there's so many negative things thrown at you because of the stereotype, I think do not let yourself be labeled as certain things. When they try to call you like the depressed generation or the anxious generation, yes, we may feel that way. So does everybody else, but we can get through it. We can be the generation who is stepping forward and helping people. The kind generation, I think one thing is, remember our good qualities. Generation Z is known for fighting for what's right, standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves, standing up for your own self. And I think while there may be low self-worth, there's also such high self-worth because we really believe in ourselves. So I think it's so important to remember, no matter who you are, where you're from, we all have the creator. We all have the same creator, and it's God, and he made you. So no matter what flaws you see in yourself, you might see that, but God doesn't see those as flaws. He made you how you are, and flaws and all, like, you're perfect in his eyes. And I think it's important to remember that, because we can get so focused on all the things in ourselves. But then you think, like, when you're 80 years old and you look back at when you were a teenager, you're going to just wish that you loved yourself more, or wish that you were reaching out to people more. I think when you're feeling lonely, you're not always needing to wait for people to call you. You do need to make the effort too. I've experienced that with myself. I'll think, why is no one reaching out to me? And while that may be true, people do need to make the effort. Someone else may be waiting for you to do that for them. So instead of just being so self-focused on everything with us, we can just kind of try to reach out to other people, and that can be how you heal, is through helping other people too, and just remembering your creator, because that is a big part of all of this. And for parents as well, if you can't help them, let them know you're here for them, but God can help them. And if you don't understand them, God does. And also, people can get so frustrated when they're praying and they feel like God's not listening, but it goes hand in hand with his word and his prayer. He answers you in many ways, but he answers you through his word. So if you feel like there's silence and now you have anger, you do have to pray, but you also have to open up his word to hear his answers. And he can also answer through other people, so you can't just isolate yourself. You have to be willing to find the solution. So
I'm so glad you kind of ended. It's a perfect way to conclude this. You came back where I was going to end to God and his word. You know, as influencers, as parents, sometimes we're going to fail, but thank God for forgiveness of sins, for the cross, for a new day, a new beginning, for God's grace. And Alyssa, is true. It comes back to what is his view of you? And we all have such tremendous value. Think about this. The creator of the universe loves you. He has amazing thoughts to you. In Psalms, it says, if I could count them, they would be more than the sand, more than the number of stars. So we need to display God's love to this generation. And it really starts in the home, parents. To me, that's one of my biggest burdens. When we want to influence a nation, a culture, a city, a county, to me, the Bible says, fathers, train up your children in your home. So to me, it starts in our home. And if my neighbor's doing the same thing, and that neighbor and this community, that's how it builds. So I think it's kind of a grassroots approach. So my appeal to all of you listening today that maybe have young people, or you have a heart for young people, bloom where you're planted, in your community, in your home church, but in your home, in the four walls, and be that shining light. And as Alyssa said, let's really have a heart of love. And I think one of the most powerful things that you mentioned is listen and to validate and listen to understand. And maybe before you give that truth, validate and show somebody that you care. So anyway, I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your transparency, your vulnerability. I think it'll make a big impact, not only on your generation, but those that have a heart for you like I do. If we can understand some of the things you're saying and we can connect, then I think that'll help us, because the bottom line is, in God's word, we're told to let our light so shine before men that they may see our good works and ultimately glorify our Father which is in heaven. So any final thoughts you want to share before we
I think
finish?
just one final thought that is important, and I think in any relationship, no matter it be friends, family, spouses, anything like that, it's important to remember it's a three-way relationship. It's you, the other person, and God. It's a triangle. God's above you guys. And you can't just try to do better as a parent without God. You need that in your life because it's a triangle. The closer you're getting to God, closer you're getting to each other. So that's super important, keeping him at the center of everything. Whether you're the parent or the child or whatever kind of relationship is going on, you need to remember that is the source and you need to stay connected to that so you can grow together, because you may be frustrated and think I'm doing all the right things. Why isn't things changing? It's because you need to have God at the center. You need to connect through God, spend more time as a family, but also be having Bible readings or just those kind of events so you can remember, like, it's not just family. You need to bring it back to God.
Thank you. Well said. Wise words. Thank you for coming on, and hopefully we'll have you come back sometime.